I'm joined now by Madhav Sharma, who worked with Sean Connery on Entrapment. Talk to me about your memories of Sir Sean.
Well, it is an odd thing. I was cast in a small role in Entrapment uh, by the director, John Emil, and the casting director, I suppose. And I went along to, I think it was Pinewood Studios. It was a long drive from here because I live in Suffolk, you see. And I got there first thing early in the morning, of course, as one has to. So I was up in the middle of the night. I went there and I started working. I was very, very tired, of course, because they wouldn't have, they didn't pay for the hotel before and all that sort of thing. Uh, but I went, and after a couple of hours I'd been working, I got a message through. We had a break for something, and I got a message through from somebody saying Sean Connery wanted to have a word with me, and he was the executive producer of the film as well as being the star of the film. And I said, "Oh, yes, okay," because he wasn't there that particular morning. He was going to come in later. Um, and he was on the phone, and he just said, "Listen, I've just watched you, and I think you're a bloody good actor. I know your career for years," and he knew everything I'd done. And he said, "I heard you say on the set that you were very tired because you'd been driven all the way from Suffolk. Well, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to give you a choice. You can either stay in a hotel somewhere nearby for this coming week. Of course, we'll pick up all the expenses. Don't you worry about that. Or I'll send a limo to take you home and bring you back each day, whichever you prefer." And I was so overwhelmed by this kindness by a man I'd never met. And of course, I accepted his offer eventually, and I did work there for about a week, and then I had to go back again later and do something else there. But it was kind of, for a man whom I'd never met, to do that to me, who was a small part in a show that he was the star of, showed me a generosity of spirit. And he'd done his research. He knew everything I'd done. I mean, he knew all about me. And he said, "Oh, yes, I've known about you for years. And
And
I've
it's
been looking
it's
at how."
certainly it's certainly a mark of the man, isn't it? When you have that personal touch, because we've all been on film sets where you go with the biggest A-listers out there, but it's those who go the extra step, the people who are so comfortable in themselves that they reach out to everybody and make them feel part of a family, really, don't they?
But it was interesting that immediately after that call, when I went back on set, I mean, I knew the director anyway. I'd worked with him in the theatre once before, and he was quite nice, but he was busy. Directors have to deal with so many different things. And suddenly the attitude of the whole set had changed. I was given a chair to sit down in between takes, none of which I had before. So he must have had a word with somebody to make all that happen.
And I think
And
when
then,
Sir Sean has a word, things happen, don't they?
of course, they do. But the thing is, I wasn't expecting such kindness from him. I mean, I was a great admirer of him as an actor. I mean, I think the Bond thing, of course, is iconic. But for me, I have some favorite performances of his which have nothing to do with Bond, you see. And it was very odd when I spoke to him because he just spoke to me as a fellow actor. He wasn't grand or anything else. He just said, "I just want to help you out because I can." I said, "Thank you, that's very kind of you." He said, "No, no, good people should be supported. In our industry, we only look after people when they become well known." And he was actually very, very nice. And that, therefore, I feel very fond of him.
Yeah. And it is interesting, Madhav, when you ask, there's always the debates here in England about who's the best Bond. And actually, if you asked all of the Bonds, they all say, including Daniel Craig, they all say
Oh,
Sir
yes. I
Sean.
mean, they were all good actors, actually, even Roger Moore for all his self deprecation. But the point is that he brought a quality of danger and a quality of, I don't know what it is, that he has an edge about him whereby you're not quite sure what he says on screen. So he can play layers very well. But then I think the other Bonds are also very good. I mean, I'm not against any of the other Bonds. And I hate comparisons between actors anyway.
Absolutely. But what's interesting is the power of the brand of Bond at the moment. We talk about cinema just about to go into another lockdown. And they were saying, and one of my local cinemas, that the Cineworld chain here in the West End, it had to close because they're so dependent on these major movie franchises. The power of something like Bond.
It's sad if that has been sold off to some streaming service or something, because I think that there's a communal experience in going to the cinema, like going to the theatre, which I think cannot be replicated really. We've all tried. You watch it at home on your television screen and it just doesn't work. Right. There are certain films you can't see, Kubrick's 2001, for example, unless you're in a big cinema that's dark with an enormous screen and lots of people all around you. And there is something about that is about the imagination in company, which is something that people, I suppose it's a thin line between that being a communal experience and it becoming mob rule kind of, hysteria. You begin to understand the power of the Trumps of this world in a way, because there is something that happens when you're with a group of people.
Oh, it's certainly a different experience. And that's what you want in talking about getting theatre back and getting cinema back and music events. You want the experience of the crowd because that enhances your own personal experience, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. I mean, the importance of the arts is something that in this country we've never really taken that seriously. But then with England, you can never be sure what is serious and what isn't. Because the thing I like most about England is the fact that they laugh at themselves at the end of the day. But the marvelous thing about art is it's totally without class, race, any of those considerations, or it should be in an ideal world. Of course, we live in a commercial world and inevitably things happen because that's what sells. And you can't, on the one hand, say, I believe in democracy, and then keep telling people how everything should be run. So one of the problems we have, my union, for example, is going on and on and on about how dreadful the situation is at the moment. And yes, it is. But for most of the time, 80% of actors were unemployed anyway. And the fact
80%, I think it's being kind. I think it's significantly more than that. And I remember that the percentages they released, they say, look, the majority of the actors, vast majority, are earning less than £5,000 a year from the profession.
I'm sure that's true. And I also think it's very sad that this confrontational approach that we have nowadays in our society, I think undermines everything. And now you don't know who to believe anymore about anything. The unions are now about to put the subscriptions up, for example, for actors. Why are they doing that? What are they doing for us? I'll tell you what it is. It's about their salaries, isn't it? And this thing of I look after myself is happening everywhere. So I'm finding it rather sad because many of the things I've believed in all my life have disappointed me, let's put it that way, because I've been naive, and actors are a strange mixture of naivety and cunning in a funny sort of way. They learn how to survive in a harsh world. They exaggerate and make up stories because it's a way of trying to expose themselves without actually exposing themselves. It's a kind of a bizarre profession in that sense.
Yeah. And here's a weird one. We're talking about comparisons beforehand with the different Bonds and who's everybody's favourite, and actually that's why it's so refreshing when you talk about your experiences with Sir Sean Connery and how much he looked after other people. And that's a nature of the man where we see lots of people on screen and we always try to imagine what they'd be like behind the scenes when the cameras are off. And it's actually those sort of touching moments where you share those sort of experiences where you get a true measure of the man.
Lucky, I have to say. I have been very lucky because in the majority of my 60-odd years I've been an actor now, is that I find that the best people are like that. They're kind, they're modest. Occasionally, of course, if they're playing a very demanding role or something, they might have to withdraw into themselves because they have to prepare themselves to do what they have to do. But there's a great thing in our business where we tend to praise people just because they're famous. On my Facebook page, for example, I'm always praising actors that nobody else knows or remembers anymore, the best Hamlet I've ever seen was a fat actor called Bill Wallace in Leicester. I mean, he is the best Hamlet I've seen. And I've seen O'Toole and I've seen everybody, you know, Finney, all those people. So it's all a matter of taste at the end of the day. And I think judgment about communication is a very complex thing, because communication involves both the person who's communicating and the person who's receiving. And the best actors know how to receive. They don't just come and impose. There are lots of people who think they're stars because they've got a big role or something, or they've come from a background which is not really theatrical. And what they tend to do is for them, position is more important. Status is more important. The best actors actually aren't like that. They know it's a game. The PR game is a game. So they play it ironically sometimes, and people misunderstand. And of course, our press are wonderful at making everything seem, you know, they talk to us about truth, about people and authenticity. My God, it is, one has to laugh at things, otherwise you would cry. And I think in life, I suppose our business is not unlike the rest of life, but there is something very special about our business, which is that the arts have a way of, I think it was Picasso, wasn't it, who said, art is a lie that enables you to tell the truth. I understand that it is an attempt to reach something, to try and understand something, but the most important thing is how you communicate it to an audience. So a lot of actors go on and on about how wonderful they are and judging all other actors. And you think, and they say, oh, I'd never do a soap, or I'd never do this, or I'd never do that. And you think, you'd be lucky if you're working, you know? Yeah. You just be grateful for what there is. This isn't to say that one can't have political plays, or one can't have plays with issues, but to make that the only way of life seems to me to be narrowing all your options as an artist.
You're absolutely right. And when your conversations with Sir Sean, as you say, it's great when you meet people in the profession who are so comfortable in themselves and they understand that. Did he pass on any pearls of wisdom to you?
No, what he did say to me, I said to him one day, I did ask him, I said, you've been very kind, thank you very much. And he said, no. I do it because I'm quite selfish. I said, what? He said, well, if I have a happy actor, I have a happy company. You know that. I don't have to tell you that. I said, yes, I know, but nobody else in the business seems to think that. He said, never think like that. There are lots of people in the business who think like that. If you look for the bad, you'll find it everywhere. Just look after yourself. There's nothing wrong. That's not selfishness, because you can't really give to other people till you have something to give.
No, absolutely.
So be true to yourself. Yeah. And that's a wonderful lesson to learn.
Be yourself, because everybody else is taken.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, or to thy own self be true, if you want to be more literary about it. But yes, I do think there is an honesty about him. But he also understands the thing that it's not about you. It's about what other people perceive. And he recognizes that you have to make it, and the best way to communicate to people is not by underlining everything, but actually by holding back and conveying. And so you learn the subtleties of nuance of communication. I had a long conversation with him about it, and I have never been so impressed. He was just wonderful. He was just wonderful because he cared about the business, and equally he was very aware of the fools, and he didn't waste his money. He didn't throw it around, you know. He said, I try and use it to the best of my ability to do the things I care about. And that's the only purpose of money. And it's the only purpose of fame, I suppose. But he wasn't that into all that, you know. He's a really good, what I call an actor. Somebody who wanted to say something about the human condition best way that he could. And a lot of people are envious of him because he was so successful. And they now say nice things now that he's dead, who weren't always so complimentary. You know, it's the same thing about Roger Moore. People always think, oh yeah, he just smiles. That's because he's so self-deprecating and he says, oh dear boy, I can't act. But actually he acts superbly. You watch his timing and you watch some of the things he does. And Sean Connery knows that. And Sean Connery also knows the difference between people. He knows that there are different kinds of truth. So casting is very important to him, and he wants actors who understand the craft, who understand the camera, and understand all he just liked my work because he said, "You're not trying to impress. You're not trying to show me how good an actor you are. You're playing the role." And that's all anybody should ever do. If you try and impress, it always looks wrong.
And it
Whereas
is that
I've
whole
seen
sort of
you,
idea of authenticity. So Sean, I always ask all my guests is that how they would like to be remembered. How do you think Sir Sean would like to be remembered?
I think he'd like to be remembered as a good actor and as a honest human being. And I think he was both those things. But then, I mean, I don't know him that well, but the little experience I had with him, I was very grateful for. And he then, after it was all over, months later, he rang me up to make sure I was all right and things, which not not many people do.
Oh no, absolutely. And hearing that sort of follow-up, not just on set then, but even when it's away from everybody else, it's not just a publicity stunt. It
No, no,
really
no,
is the
no.
genuine
I
one.
never talked about it before because he said this isn't, but he did say that if you really are an artist, you're interested in what you give to other people. That includes your fellow actors, it includes the writer, but above all, it includes the audience. He said we tend to get a little up ourselves and think it's all about us or the critic or or try to impress the next employer, but it isn't. It's about if you're honest and do the right thing. I mean, I noticed you, he said, because the first day when you came, you just had your back to the camera because that's what the scene demanded. But you played the scene absolutely truthfully. And I went, yeah, thank you. What can one say? And he was totally, how should I put it, unembarrassed about anything he did. He was just so centered that he could just be what he was. And there was a kind of, even in life, there wasn't extra charm. When he was being kind, he didn't put on a voice to be kind. He didn't say, "Oh, would you like a chair?" He didn't do that. He just said, "Would you like a chair?" Right, we'll have a chair. It was very simple, direct. And there is something extraordinary about that directness. And people say he's always the same. Yes, I know he played a Russian submarine commander with a Scottish accent. But isn't it extraordinary that he made me forget the accent after a bit? Because there was something about his truth that made me suspend my disbelief. So he never underestimated the audience. And he had a nice kind of a gentle sense of humor. He didn't suffer fools gladly. I mean, I talk as if I know him intimately, which I don't. But I'm very grateful and privileged. I feel privileged to have known him.
You say he didn't suffer fools gladly. What sort of examples did you have of that?
Well, he liked people who didn't make excuses, who didn't waste time. He hated people who complained on set. He thinks if somebody has a legitimate grievance, they should go to the right person and have a quiet word, and it'll get sorted. And if it doesn't get sorted, but you don't come in and talk about it all the time because it destroys the atmosphere that he was building on set, which is one of mutual trust. He said, without trust, how can you be a good actor? How can you act unless you listen to your fellow actor? And that was, it was all the things I'd been taught and I knew.
Fantastic advice. Well, it's so refreshing to hear that not only was he wonderful on screen, but he was also wonderful off screen and genuine to other people. But for now, Madhav Sharma, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you.